If you want to be better at working with other people or talking to people, okay? Or better with sales. It's this idea of cause and effect. The effect you want is better with people or better with sales. You have to reverse engineer what actually causes that. And I think it's three things. I think it's your mindset, right? It's your strategy and tactics and your activity. So let's take like a good example is like dancing, right? So if you want to learn how to dance, you got to have the right mindset around that. You have to be confident. You have to like think of yourself as someone who's a good dancer. So there's a skill there when it comes to your mindset. What's your strategy and tactic for learning how to dance? Are you gonna do YouTube videos? Are you gonna hire a private instructor? Are you gonna go to group classes at the YMCA? Right? Like, what's your strategy and tactic for getting better? And then the activity is actually just doing the strategy and tactics consistently. So likewise, if you want to be better at sales, you have to learn some mindset skills around how to think about money, how to think about sales, how to think about business. You have to know how to have a sales conversation, and then you have to do the activity piece, which is having sales conversations consistently. So that's how I think about that.
Welcome to another episode of the Business 101 podcast. My name is Ayo Oye. No business will work without getting two things right: marketing and sales. Over the last few episodes, we have spoken extensively with several marketing experts, and today on the show, we'll be taking a deep dive and unpacking what a winning sales strategy looks like. I have with me Christopher Filipiak, an engineer turned sales expert who helps CEOs master their own sales strategy and build what he calls sales ready organizations. If you've ever felt awkward about selling, then this conversation will flip your thinking. And it will also give you some practical tools to double your sales in record time. So let's get started. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thanks, Io. It's good to be here.
It's good to have you on the show. Let's just start from the top, right? Can we talk a bit through your own sales journey? I mean, with an engineering background, how did you end up in sales?
Yeah, it's kind of unusual, but it actually happens like more than you would think. I know lots of engineers that are now CEOs and sales people. I think that I was just always kind of in sales, from trading baseball cards in elementary school
Yeah,
to selling Cub Scout popcorn to starting my own businesses in high school and
yeah,
doing that, but when I had to, like, pick a job or a career, um, I remember, like, going to the lobby or going to the library and, like, looking at those, like, those books that were, like, these government statistical books on, like, average salaries for different professions, and I was
yeah.
like, "Shit, like, I gotta, like, pick what I wanna be when I grow up," because like, that's, like, what my generation was told to do. It was like, "Hey, you gotta, like, pick the one thing you wanna be when you grow up, and here are the choices and here are the salary ranges." And so I grew up outside of Detroit and also was really good at math and kind of decided that I wanted to be an engineer because I loved cars and I was good at math. And so I studied engineering, the engineering that attracted me because I have this like people side of me. Like I really care, like I really like people a lot was the idea of industrial engineering because it's the engineering and the study of people and machine systems. Like, how do you build systems that are integrated together that involve humans and machines? So I studied that and worked at Ford Motor Company building F-150s and Mustangs for a long time, for several years, and was a top engineer there and decided to go back to school because I really wanted to be with the people and the money and went back to school, got my MBA, and then worked in corporate consulting for several years doing sales work. And when I started my own firm, one of the things that I think is so relevant to bringing those engineering ideas and those engineering principles to sales operations is understanding that sales is really a system of systems and it's really about process and workflow. So those engineering principles like waste reduction and value stream mapping and continuous improvement and
Mhm.
all of those ideas from my manufacturing day really are beneficial to helping an organization set up their sales operations, their go to market, their sales enablement strategies in a way that's really efficient. So, I still love math and engineering, and there's a part of me that misses that, but I'd much rather work with, you know, humans and people than and you do. I'm not saying that like engineers don't work with other people, but I really want to help people be performant and help them really develop a level of mastery around sales and making money, because I think if you can do that, then you really set yourself free in a way that very few people on the planet get. And from the perspective of being a CEO, it's one of the most important things. I think it's the number one skill set that you need to learn as a CEO. And I recommend some level of sales mastery for almost everybody.
Interesting. One question, Chris. Do
Yeah.
you drive a Mustang or an F-150 right now?
I drive an F1.
Okay, okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. I was gonna ask, right? Having this background, an engineering background, does it play a part into how you serve CEOs now? The kind of advice that you give and how you essentially think around the kind of problems that CEOs have. Does it play a part?
Yeah, for sure. Like I don't really talk about the fundamental engineering principles that I use when I'm designing sale operations and sales systems and processes, but I definitely bring those fundamentals into the work that I do. The two biggest ones that I probably use the most are the ideas of like value stream mapping, like what are the processes and what are the things that actually contribute to the result that the CEO or the business is trying to achieve. And then I also think about waste reduction, because when you're looking at create like growing profit and growing revenue, there's so much wasted motion in sales and marketing, and people are doing all sorts of things that aren't actually translating to the bottom line or the top line revenue or a net margin, EBITDA, if you will. And it's super important that you look at where the value is and what are the things that you can take out of the system, and that's probably one of the two biggest benefits that I bring for the CEOs and for the companies that I'm building out a sales operation for.
Interesting, interesting. And Chris, I mean, you work with CEOs every day of your life, right? You do know that no firm, no company, no business is gonna thrive if they don't get their sales strategy right, you know. And a lot of leaders and founders, when they think about sales, they're just like, "Oh, I'm just gonna hire a bunch of people and pay them to handle sales." You've said that this is not a good strategy. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so what I saw, IO, and I've worked with hundreds of businesses um, since starting my firm in 2017, and I worked with many of those um, between 2021 and 2022, like just after COVID, where I was doing some bench work for a larger firm, and they needed someone who had the experience and the knowledge to perform sales operation assessments for their clients and then do right scaling roadmaps for those businesses. Before that and since that time, one of the things that I noticed and I observed talking to all these CEOs is that they all want to scale. The majority of them, you talk to most CEOs and their revenue, they want to increase revenue somewhere between 50% and 100% in the next 1 to 3 years. Like that's kind of the standard of what they'll say for the size clients and the size businesses that I work with. And one of the primary strategies they'll use is they're like, oh shit, like I gotta scale. I need salespeople. Okay. So when I looked at that and I talked with them about that, the majority of CEOs did that. Okay. They were like, oh, I need to scale. I'm gonna hire salespeople. And what ended up happening in almost 100% of the time is they would end up firing a lot of those salespeople that they hired. Okay. And it's really expensive to hire and fire salespeople. Like on average, the data is like, anywhere from $400,000 to $1 million in terms of hiring cost, opportunity cost, training cost, coaching cost, all of that
So,
combined.
hires.
It's like it's not it's not the most viable strategy. And then that's not saying like you can't stand up a successful sales team. You absolutely can, but I think there's a process. There's an order of operations that if you get reversed makes things really, really difficult. So the thing that's tricky about revenue and sales is that if the business fundamentals, if the business model, if the business fundamentals, if the go-to-market things aren't in place, even the best salespeople in the world aren't going to be able to overcome that, right? There's some like foundational pieces. Some of them that come to mind are clarity on like who your market is. It's about clarity on kind of what their problem is and having an offer that solves that. It's also clarity on your message. Like in your message is everything. It's your sales scripts, it's your website, it's your LinkedIn profile, all of that. It's your the conversations you have, it's your proposals, all of that is your message. And so you want to have that message market fit. Okay. That needs to be in place. And then you need um a sales process that can actually consistently, a sales and marketing process that can consistently create conversations and allow you to have really high level sales conversations that result in people buying from you easily. And so if the business isn't what I call sales ready, if some of those fundamental pieces aren't actually in place, then hiring a salesperson can be very expensive because it makes it really hard for them to be successful with what they are doing. So if the CEO hasn't mastered sales and helped develop that competency and it is avoiding their sales work, they're going to build a culture that avoids sales. And the other thing is the primary job of the CEO is to create growth of revenue and profit, right? And that means they need to be talking to the market and bringing in money and making sales. And when you do that, the business grows confidence around cash and cash flow and can use that money to reinvest and build out that sales foundation. And then once that's in place and working, you can start to bring in other salespeople, other people who can help you scale what's actually already working. Right. But if you're trying to scale something that's not working, that's where things get really difficult and unpleasant.
Interesting. So it sounds like what you're saying is that CEOs need to move from delegating to owning the sales process. But I've heard a lot of people say that that could potentially be an easy hit or miss. A good example is Elon Musk, who is kind of the face of Tesla, and in some way, through his personality being a very forthright and a very in your face person, seems like Tesla sometimes suffers, sometimes benefits from Elon's personality. And there's a potential that that's going to happen when the CEO is kind of in charge or at least takes responsibility for sales. What do you say to that? And how can, CEOs, how can they balance being, involved and responsible for sales with still letting the firm have like an autonomous personality that
I think that, well, most of the clients that I work with IO aren't the size of Tesla, right? Most of my clients are, between 5 million in revenue and 200 million. They're mid-market and small enterprise businesses. And at businesses those size, the CEO is absolutely involved in sales. And even, Elon Musk may not be making cold calls every day or on the lot selling Teslas,
yeah,
but he's definitely, he's speaking, he's doing business development, he's building relationships, he's doing really
exactly.
high level business development. And I'm not advocating for like the CEO spending, all day on creating TikTok videos, right? Or some type of or being on the phone all day doing hundreds of cold calls. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the CEO spending some really quality, efficient, supported time doing the most effective miracle generating activities that they can do to drive revenue and doing that consistently, finding a way to do that consistently. So you can absolutely build your team and build your culture and work on your vision, right? And set the direction of the firm, which are all very important roles that the CEO needs to be playing, but the CEO is the best positioned person starting from right now, like today, into over the next 6 to 12 months to create extra cash and do deals. And it's actually not hard for them. They just need a little bit of support and a little bit of focus and a good system to use. So
Interesting. Do you have any personal success stories, from CEOs that you worked with who had a culture of delegating sales and then eventually got to the point where they could own it? What does that look like?
yeah, so a lot of the CEOs that I work with are working with sales teams that aren't performing. Okay. And so what I'll do is I'll come in and I'll assess what's working, what's missing, and what needs improvement. And we'll use the lens of the sales ready organization to do that work. And then whatever's not working, we'll be like, okay, let's just stop doing that, and that because it's not leading to the result that you want. Let's build you a system that feels good to you, and some things that you're willing to do. A lot of CEO business development and sales it can be really high level. It can be speaking engagements, it can be thought leadership, it can be podcasting, it can be creating and leading events, managing the largest deals. And so when I help those CEOs who are normally resistant to doing
Yeah.
sales, help them shift the way they're thinking about it and see how important their own mastery around money and sales actually is, they end up bringing in a lot of money into their business, right?
Mm.
And then as they develop competence, then they can actually show up from a place of experience going, and mastery is like going, I know how to make the money that I need to make when I need to make it. Like I know how to do that.
Mm.
And I have no discomfort. I have no emotional trigger around talking with strangers about money, right?
Yeah.
And that when you show up with that, when you develop that internal alignment and confidence, then it's like, I'm not saying teams are like children, but the best way to teach is by example,
Yeah.
right? You know, and go, hey, like, I know how to do this. And you drive that competence and that awareness down into the organization, right? And you end up not tolerating, anyone who's a B, C, or D player on your team. So, you can go, "Oh, I get it. Because I know what this takes. I know what's required. I can lead from a real place of experience and awareness
Yeah.
and competence."
Yeah. Chris, in today's AI-led world, a lot of founders happen to be engineers, software engineers. That's like the highest feeding, I guess, profile to like the CEO slash founder pool right now. And a lot of people have said that engineers are not the best people persons. So for founders who feel like talking to people is not my strong suit and things like that, what is the first, I guess, one or two first steps they can take to start building their confidence around speaking to people, being comfortable having this money conversation start to speak about?
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of engineers, and many of us are great people, right? I think that there's a stereotype around that, but engineers are great. Solve a lot of problems and
Yeah.
know how to work with people and are highly talented. So I think whatever every time someone says that they want something or want some type of result, I always think about this idea of cause and effect and this framework of cause and effect that I teach to all my clients and I share with everyone I talk to, where if you want to be if you want to be better at working with other people or talking to people, okay, or better with money, better with sales. It's this idea of cause and effect. The effect you want is better with people or better with sales. You have to reverse engineer what actually causes that. And I think it's three things. I think it's your mindset, right? It's your strategy and tactics and your activity. So let's take like a good example is like dancing, right? So if you want to learn how to dance with another man or another woman, any variation of, you got to have the right mindset around that. Like you have to be able to know what you want. You have to be confident. You have to like think of yourself as someone who's a good dancer. So that there's a skill there when it comes to your mindset. There's a skill when it comes to your strategies and tactics, which is you have to learn how to dance. Well, what type of
Yeah.
dance are you going to do? Are you going to learn to break dance? Are you going to learn to swing dance? Right? Are you going to learn to do the two step? Like, what's your strategy and tactic for learning how to dance? Are you going to do YouTube videos? Are you going to hire a private instructor? Are you going to go to group classes at the YMCA? Right? Like, what's your strategy and tactic for getting better at that? And then the activity is actually just doing the strategy and tactics consistently. So likewise, if you want to be better at sales, you have to learn some mindset skills around how to think about money, how to think about sales, how to think about business. You have to learn some strategy and tactics. You have to know how to have a sales conversation. You need to know how to create a sales conversation to talk with people. And then you have to do the activity piece, which is having sales conversations consistently. So that's how I think about that. Whether you're an engineer or a CEO or a baker or a plumber, it's all about going, well, this is the result that I want. I need to develop some skills around creating that result. And whether that's again like sales, or you want to be a better leader, or you want to be a better teammate, or you want to be a better husband or wife or father or mother, salesperson, it's a skill thing. And that's what I realized. So that was a big unlock for me, I know, when I was like, I was learning all these things, but they weren't tied to what I actually wanted to create. And then as soon as I understood that kind of that cause and effect framework, things got a lot easier for me.
Interesting. Interesting. And Chris, you've said that a CEO's go-to strategy shouldn't be, to hire a sales team. But most companies would eventually need sales team at some point in the life of the business. When do you think that right time is, and how should CEOs think about preparing themselves to get there and handling it once they do actually need to bring a sales team in?
Yeah, I the pithy answer is you can hire. I think learning to run a successful sales team and lead a successful sales team is going to be expensive. Like I think it's like when you are profitable and have enough cash to experiment and learn how to actually do that and stand that up successfully. I also think it's about when you've developed your own level of mastery or are moving in that direction where you know how to create the money you need when you need it. So if you actually need to build out a competent sales team and you need to have cash to like help you be sales ready and get some of those fundamental pieces in place so that person can come in and help scale what's working, that's the time to do it. So what I would say what that looks like is that you have a sense of mastery around making sales whenever you want to. You can go, oh, I want to make a sale this week or next week. I actually know how to do that. We know as an organization and as a person how to make sales, right? And then that way you can go, okay, let me hire a couple of salespeople, pay them well. Let me hire a couple player salespeople who are going to perform for me and show them our way of doing that, allow them to scale something that's working. So I think for each business, it's going to be a little bit unique, and it's also going to be something that you improve over time and you get better at over time. So
Yeah.
I know that's kind of it's not like a super precise. It's not like hire a sales team when you're at 5 million in revenue or
Yeah.
hire a sales team when you're at 20 million in revenue, right?
It's a consulting answer.
Yeah.
It
It does depend. But it really does. I mean, I've worked with businesses that are less than $1 million in revenue that have several salespeople working for them and that they're not doing too great. And I've also seen businesses that are, 15, 20 million where the only salesperson is the CEO and they're doing fantastic. You don't need to build a big team, especially like with all the AI stuff coming out right now and all the
mm,
if you can understand how to create leverage, right? If you understand
yes.
leverage as a CEO, time, money, knowledge, AI, people, right?
Mhm.
You can build something that is you yourself in your own sales work can be a real point of leverage, right? Yeah. especially if
Yeah.
you're well supported. I think that's the thing is that CEO is so knowledgeable and so influential and has so many stories. It's really easy to leverage the CEO to drive revenue in the business, to create revenue in the business.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely spot on. And Chris, what does the average growth look like for companies who CEOs or business leaders have made this mental mind shift or mental mindset shift from trying to outsource sales to now owning it? What does the result and effect typically look like?
Most of the CEOs I'm working with are adding 1 million plus in revenue every 6 months to their business from their own work. Some multiple $1 million every 6 months. And those companies are they're various sizes. So the percentage growth is going to be dependent on how many people I'm setting up. When I set up a sales organization or a sales process
Yeah,
for a $200 million firm, right? There's much more total revenue in terms of total amount, but a smaller percentage of the total growth
yeah,
of the firm, right? But when I set up a sales operation, a CEO-led sales operation, they're a $5 million firm, and the CEO adds $2 million over the next 6 months. It's a pretty
that's
fucking big deal.
40%. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, right? Like that's a game changer for those businesses.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And Chris, when most people think about sales, they think about, this high pressure tactics, cold calls, somebody trying to string you into making a buy. And it's uncomfortable for a lot of people, right? How have you seen effective sales tactic change, over time, especially in the age of AI? What innovations have you seen come to the art of selling, inspired by AI or technology or what have
That's a really good question. I think most people show up in a sales conversation from what I call like a get energy.
you?
And it's really, even myself who has studied sales a long time, like there's still a part of me that's showing up in a get energy, right? Even though I've done the deep inner work and I've really like I don't listen to that part anymore. And I've learned like it's smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller over time. But I think most salespeople are showing up from a place they want to get the sale, they want to close the deal, they want to get the
Yes.
money. They need the money. They're required to have to do that. And I think when you show up from that place, you're showing up really attached, and you open yourself up to fear of rejection,
Yeah.
um, and not feeling good enough and all of that. So and that can be a lot of pressure on you, and it can be a lot of pressure that the people you're selling to can really feel too. And I think it's really understanding. I think it's really starting to understand a couple of key fundamental mindset shifts that we do truly live in a world of abundance. And money is
Mm,
something we made up as humans to allow us to transact easier, and that we all have the same amount of it. Okay. And money's job is to flow. Like we're supposed to have some money, and then we're supposed to use the money, and then we're supposed to bring in more money. And so
yeah.
it's not meant to like help us feel safe or to
Mm,
give us some type of emotional response. It's going, hey, this money is a tool for us to use. And also understanding the same with a sale. Like the purpose of a sale is to exchange goods and services with another
mhm, mm,
person. And when you start to understand and you start to build a business that is actually of service to other people and really embrace, you can really shift from that get mindset or that scarcity mindset into what I call like a give mindset. And then even what I call
mm.
sales as an expression of love, um, or sales um, yeah, like as an
After that, mm,
love. And then
yeah,
you're showing up to go like, hey, like I'm really here to give you something. Like I'm here to give you better profitability, or I'm here to give you more top line revenue, or I'm here to give you experience or a better team or a more
yeah,
efficient way to do something. And then that way, when you're calling, you're also understanding that there's also people out in the world who really need what you do, that can really benefit from what you do. And then you're just trying to find those
those
people
people.
Yeah, and you're going like, "Hey man, like I'm here." Like for my business, when I call people, like I'm calling from a place of going, "Look, I can help you. I can put $1 million in your pocket in the next 6 months without salespeople.
Mm.
Do you want to do that?" Right?
Yeah.
You benefit from an extra $1 million, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
More freedom and more ease and doing things in a way that doesn't feel so hard and stuck, right?
Yeah.
You know? And I think that's the place. And then it becomes like cold calling. Like cold calling such a good litmus test for how you're feeling about this, right? But it can become a real joy to talk to other humans. Like humans want to talk to each other and they want to help. They don't necessarily want to be like cold pitched or sold to, but
Yeah.
most want to interact with want to interact, and we're like the most creative species that we know of on the entire planet in the known universe.
Mm.
I think if you do that inner work to get yourself to that place and you design a business and a sales motion that embraces like that idea of sales readiness and sales as an expression of love, then you can use AI really effectively to help make that more efficient.
Yeah.
But AI is just gonna replicate whatever's actually going on inside of you or whatever you tell it to do. So if you're using it to scale or create something that's needy and attached and judgmental and coming from a get,
Yeah.
you're just gonna create more of that and that's gonna be really unpleasant. But if you're
Mm.
using it to create something beautiful and giving and creates more life and really helps people, then it can be a powerful tool to do
Yeah.
that. Oh.
That makes sense. There's a question I've always wondered about, Chris, and it's, if you look at the sales funnel, right, it's more so, awareness at the top of it, and then interest, consideration, and then purchase. You find a lot of CEOs and a lot of sellers generally focus more on the purchase bit, which is like the actual closing bit of the funnel.
Mm.
And my sixth sense is that that's probably not where most of the value is, right? What do you think? In your experience, when you're trying to come up with a sales strategy for a CEO or an organization, where do you put the most effort? Where have you typically seen most value being unlocked?
Well, I think why CEOs are comfortable further down the funnel, like deeper into the funnel, is there's less rejection there, right?
Mm.
So it's a more comfortable space to operate. And most CEOs, almost every CEO I have talked to me tells me like, look, they'll all say something to the effect of, I'm really good at sales, right? And they'll be like, if I'm in the right room with the right person at the right time and they're ready to buy, I'm really good at sales, right?
Yeah.
And I know how to close them. So what I just want you to bring me more of the right
Give me the
people
right
in the right
people.
room at the right
Yeah.
time who are
Mm.
ready to buy and I can close
Yeah.
them. And that's not the only part of sales that there is. Like creating the conversation's a huge part of it. Like understanding how to talk to people and doing all the business development stuff. And that's kind of marketing, but sales it just isn't just about closing someone who's ready to buy. The other thing that I learned this, I worked with a marketing agency out in California, and I just thought this was I thought this was such an interesting case study for me. It was like a 15, $20 million agency. It had two founders, so two co-founders. And when I was talking with them during their assessment, I did separate interviews with each out of them, and I found out like the one co-founder sold mostly projects. Okay, so when that co-founder had a sales conversation, it always ended up in project work for the firm. And then when the other co-founder talked to very similar clients, it always ended up in like a different set of like retainer based work. Okay. And both of those founders were like, hey, we're so good at sales.
Mm.
But I'm like, look, guys, you're not that good at sales because both of you are underserving the client because
Yeah.
you're not
Yeah.
actually having a complete sales conversation that's resulting in project work plus retainer
Yeah.
work
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
retainer
Yeah.
work, right? So I thought I always remember that like as a case study. There's always probably going to be, more lost deals in your CRM than won deals, and that can be it depends how you measure that too.
Yeah.
Most people
Yeah.
try to like gain that number,
Yeah.
but the in terms of like the funnel, where to put your focus, I think I think that the areas where I help people create the most value is going, hey, like let's get you really clear on the revenue that you want, and let's look really specifically at like value stream and what's actually leading to that revenue. And I notice in a lot of organization, they're doing a lot of things that they can stop doing. So the most valuable thing is to look at your marketing and your sales landscape and be real honest with yourself about what's leading to new clients and new revenue in the business. And if it's not leading directly to that, those are things that you can cut out. The other
Interesting.
valuable thing is just kind of having a framework of how to think about your sales operation. So you're not building stuff that's like disconnected. If you want to add revenue in the next 6 months, like the strategy isn't to start writing a book, right? But a lot
Yeah.
of like people are like, oh, I need to start working on my book, or I need to redo
Mm.
my website, or I need to set up my podcast, or there's all these things that people get their ideas to, especially because there's a lot of marketing telling us to do that. There's a lot of people selling that stuff. No
Yes.
one is like, man, you know what? I need to add revenue. Let me pick up my phone and call someone today and say, hey, do you want to work with me? Like that's the fastest way to add revenue. And if you do that a couple times a day over the course
Mm.
of a year, like you're gonna make sales, right?
Yes.
But if you spend your time in confusion about what you're doing, um, or trying to do thing that is like sabotaging or avoiding actually what leads to making sales, you're not gonna grow as quickly as you want to. And books are great, but they're not necessarily the fastest way to add revenue.
Yeah. 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 Wow, that's very profound, Chris. Any final words? What would you want someone who listened to this episode to take away?
I always think of, what's coming up for me. I always this idea of like 5 things you can do every day to help yourself with your business, with mastering sales as a CEO. And I think the first one is just to like make a commitment to doing a little bit of sales work every day. Right? It doesn't have to be all day. I always think of growing revenue or growing your business or hitting your goals as like half your day profitably helping clients, half your day making sales. Like if you didn't have any team to run. But you don't have to spend 30 minutes, spend an hour every single day making sales, like meaning you're creating and having sales conversations. The second thing is really understanding how to feel your feelings. And I just wrote an article about this, how important feeling your feelings is to successfully making sales. And I mean, we could spend half a day talking about that. We could do another 4 podcast episodes on why that is, but I encourage anyone listening to this and resonating with what we're talking about to go to my website and find that article on why feeling your feelings is like the number one sales strategy.
Yeah, I'm gonna add that to this.
The From there, you just really want to create clarity on what it is you want, and you also want to use cause and effect thinking. And then the last piece is just like using your calendar and keeping your word to yourself. So, if you're looking to add 1 million plus in revenue, you know, 5 million plus, like it depends on the scale of your business and your deal size. Like you're the one to do it as a CEO. Like you can, you can start today. That's what's so cool about, a CEO who's supported. Like you can start today. Like you could put cash in your pocket and do it starting now. Like you don't have to hire a team or hire a salesperson. Really learn that the parting thought is to really commit to mastering sales.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. Thanks for coming on the show, Chris, and thanks for all of your insight.
Yeah, for sure. You're so welcome. Thanks for having me on, IO, and thanks for listening and tuning in, everybody.
See you on another episode of the Business 101 podcast.